A friend of mine invited me to a dinner party a couple of weeks ago, but he warned me that it was going to be a vegetarian dinner, which meant there would be a lot of vegetarian people there. Since I love to eat meat, I was a little worried I was going to get some lectures by some vegans. Some people avoid meat for personal reasons. Some people avoid meat for health reasons. But some people avoid meat for political reasons, which means they love to lecture other people about their beliefs. And most of us, given the opportunity, would love to lecture others about our beliefs. It turns out that this is a deep human instinct, the most powerful human instinct, to be in a position of power so that we can tell others what to do. So I had a bunch of anti-vegan arguments ready just in case we got into the old bacon versus vegetables argument. I was well prepared to tell others why it is a good idea to eat bacon, why everybody should eat more bacon. In fact, if you can persuade vegans to love bacon, you can pretty much persuade anybody to do anything. So I prepared my bacon arguments before the vegan dinner party just in case. It's always a good idea to pre-frame any situation where you might need to use powerful arguments. I was watching this really weak movie the other night. It was about some ex-hippies that were now fairly wealthy. They were getting together in their 30s for some kind of a reunion dinner party. It was in this really nice house up on the hills with a nice view over the city. And they had a lot of leftover drama from college. Down the street were a bunch of bikers who were cooking meth. And there was some kind of a reason why the rich ex-hippies had to interact with the biker meth people. It was to set up some kind of a conflict to make this more interesting. And while the rich ex-hippies were battling with the biker meth people, the world ended. They didn't explain why, it just ended. And so the second half of the movie was about how the rich ex-hippies had to work together with the biker meth people to survive the apocalypse. And the movie ended with everybody working together in this garden, symbolizing how bikers and hippies can work together to survive the apocalypse by growing a bunch of tomatoes or something. A lot of companies recently are going green, at least that's what I've been reading. I've read a few articles about how companies are finding out that if they go green, they can increase profits. The idea is that going green is pro-capitalist or something. I thought that this sounded like a bunch of propaganda, so I wanted to do more research to find out if this was nonsense. There was a scientist a couple of years ago, a super brilliant scientist. This guy wanted to save the world. He was being courted by two different organizations. One was a university that promised him a fast track to tenure. Another was a corporation that wanted to train the world to become vegetarian. They wanted to create a whole line of products that tasted like bacon and pork chops and hot dogs, but were made out of plants. The idea was that by convincing the world to go vegan, they would save the planet and get really rich in the process. So this super genius scientist decided to follow the money. But it turned out that this was a total scam. The guys running the fake bacon company were only in it for the profits. They spent tons of money to build a lab. They spent tons of money to equip the lab. But this was all marketing nonsense. They just wanted to build up the value of this, to turn this into an IPO. They would make billions of dollars, sell their stake, and then let the company go bankrupt. The super genius scientist found out that this was all a scam. So he decided to save the world on his own. After doing research, he found out that the main problem harming our planet was too many people. So he pretended to play along, all the while creating a new form of food-based DNA manipulation. Once enough of this was in your system, it would make your DNA revert back to our ancient proto-human cannibal past. It takes between 8 to 12 months of eating this food to convert your DNA. And to accelerate this process, this scientist convinced his venture capital overlords to buy several existing brands, which they did about 2 years ago, which means that many well-known international food brands have been artificially engineered to alter your DNA. And since these brands are so widely used, he estimates that up to 80% of the population will revert to proto-human cannibals within a year. When it happens, this will happen quickly. One day, everybody will act like normal. The next day, when the DNA reversion happens, everybody will turn into cannibals. This crazy scientist believes that this will be a wonderful process. After doing some research, I found out exactly how this scam works. Companies that are losing money, that aren't able to make a profit, figure out how to go green. Once they go green, they get a bunch of government subsidies. Then they add these subsidies to their balance sheet. The scam is very simple. They lose money, collect a bunch of money from the government, and pretend they are able to make a profit. After the terrible movie ended, I was curious how much land it would actually take to support a bunch of ex-hippies and some biker meth people. With a little research, I found out that it takes 1 whole acre using post-industrial technology to keep 1 human alive, which means that if you are planning on living off your backyard garden after the apocalypse comes, you'll need more land. 1 acre is a lot of land. It would take you all day just to take care of it. But while you are sleeping, people might steal your stuff, which means you might need to hire a couple of guys to protect your land while you sleep, which means for each one of those guys, you'll need 1 extra acre. If you have a family of 4, you'll need 4 acres, plus an extra acre for everybody that works for you. It might work if you lived alone in a very huge area, but in modern society, when there will be a ton of hungry people roaming around, the math simply doesn't work out. Given the most likely situation in a post-apocalyptic collapse, being self-sufficient but having an old-school farm with animals and crops is not mathematically possible. The more animals you keep, the more land you need to grow the food to feed the animals, which means when the food apocalypse does happen, it's going to be absolute chaos. But scientists aren't sure which is coming first, the food apocalypse or the cannibal apocalypse. But most experts agree that the average person only has about a 0.5% chance of surviving through both, whichever of these comes first. It turns out that I didn't need my bacon language patterns. Nobody really preached veganism at this dinner party. The food was actually very, very delicious. But after dinner, all everybody talked about was their gardening techniques, which means this was the most boring thing ever. I showed up ready with a ton of bacon defense patterns, and I had to listen to a conversational contest to see who could come up with the cleverest way to grow tomatoes. Had I known this was going to happen, I would have brought tons of clever ways to cook bacon, tons of clever ways about how to eat bacon. I'm not a big fan of tomatoes or whatever other weird vegetables these weird people talked about all goddamn night long.